It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, I got a little frog in my voice this week, so that doesn't bother folks, but we're at the offices of Above and Beyond Cancer in historic Valley Junction in West Des Moines. And we're talking with Christopher Goodale. And it's all about this organization, and it's what I've read. It sounds very near and dear to my heart because this is really what the podcast is all about. I get to talk about things that are important to me, things that have touched my life and the people around me, and there isn't anybody that hasn't been touched by this worldwide scourge of cancer. And it affects us all. These folks are doing great work, and they've got a great twist on it. It's very serious business, but it's also kind of fun. So let me read you a little bit of the About Us from their website. It says that they elevate lives, strengthening minds, bodies, and spirits. It was founded in 2011 by Des Moines, Iowa oncologist Dr. Richard Deming, and their team takes cancer survivors on incredible adventures. Above and Beyond Cancer journeys have led participants to places like Mount Everest Base Camp and the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. But the work isn't about getting to the tops of mountains, obviously. Through their transformational journeys, their participants inspire the public by devoting themselves to a life of advocacy and an example for healthy living and cancer prevention in their communities. Welcome, Christopher.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So the organization really hasn't been around that long. 2011, really done some fine work since then. Tell us about the genesis for this.
It's all started when Dr. Deming took a group of cancer survivors and caregivers to Everest Base Camp. And then when they came back, they realized that they had sort of caught lightning in a bottle in some ways, and they wanted to create a more permanent organization. So they did all the paperwork and came through with an organization that we now know pretty familiar with as Above and Beyond Cancer.
Now, what is it with the great outdoors and with somebody that finds themselves in this situation? The connection is great because, as an example, as much as we're a tech society, somebody that is affected by cancer, you wouldn't take them to the servers of Google and show them that.
Right.
I mean, that's not going to uplift and elevate the spirit, but a trip to the Himalayas certainly would. And I don't know, what is it with the outdoors?
Well, and it's interesting. We've created a pattern now. We have 9 weekly programs, and we also have an outdoor adventure every month. So in February, for example, we did what we tagged as the fur ride. People wore fake fur and rode about 12 miles from the Chicken in Arilla to the Iowa tap room.
Yeah.
And it was 11 degrees that morning. So we convinced about 23 folks to ride their bikes, but we had about 100 folks at the Iowa tap room with a band and having fun. And the socialization and the interaction that we have, probably the coolest thing and what attracted me to our organization in the first place is we invite anybody with any kind of cancer to be part of our organization, but also all their caregivers. So we have a number of people who are very active in our organization who were the caregiver to their spouse or to their child who ended up losing their life to cancer, but they're still highly involved in our organization because they see the high value of what it is that we do with our weekly programs and with our educational series and with the adventures, whether they be local or, as you had talked about, across the country or across the world.
And what about the disease or the diseases of cancer? I guess the last time that I really investigated it, so to speak, or looked at it was that fine public television series that they had
absolutely.
on cancer. And I'm kind of slow on the uptake, and my memory isn't the greatest. My main 2 takeaways with that really is that there has been some remarkable advancements made in childhood cancers and survival rates there. And the other thing that, I don't know, maybe it's bad news, but the thing that I was not aware of, with cancer isn't just a thing. It isn't just one disease. The part of the problem with this cancer research is that there are so many variants that it's you can't just cure cancer. You have to attack each one of these individually.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so much of what's done surrounding treatment of cancer is it's all trial and error. One of the things that I experienced in my own cancer journey was when I would get a certain kind of chemo, they would say, well, you need to chew ice with this while you take this. And I would say, why? And they'd say, well, because otherwise you'll get mouth sores. And I'm like, oh, give me the ice. But the way that we found that out was one of their patients was randomly chewing on ice when he got this particular chemical pushed into his body, and he didn't get the mouth sores. So the nursing staff was like, well, wait a second, this is perfect,
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's see if this really works to all the other patients in the room. And then they were glad to share that with other people in their network. And then it just continued to. So something as simple as that sort of that trial and error, and I would ask things like, well, how come this one takes 5 hours to infuse and the last one only took 30 minutes? And they said, well, because we tried doing the other one quickly, and then we found out people just got too sick too fast.
Uh-huh.
So we slowed it down, and then they didn't get sick. And I said, well, that seems smart, So the constant trial and error, I think back to when I was in high school, and our scout leader at the time was stricken with cancer, and it just was awful, the things that the cure, so to speak, was causing his body at the time, but he was willing to do whatever it took to get, not necessarily to his own survival, but to help the next person who had that same kind of cancer in trying to determine the best treatment therefore.
What you're describing there with the ice chips, that's a almost purely physical thing. But the thing that's striking or interesting to me about cancer is that connection between mind and body.
Right.
I'm a hockey guy, so I watch the Detroit Red Wings broadcast, and Mickey Redmond has been struggling. He's the color commentator with cancer for a lot of his adult life. He's managed to beat it so far. But he's big on this optimistic, this positive thinking thing. I mean, he won't allow or let anybody go to the negative side because it has an extremely detrimental effect. What is the connection between the mind and the body with cancer?
Yeah, one of the centers of our attention with Above and Beyond Cancer is mind, body, spirit. So we want people to be active, get off the couch, and keeping that positive attitude is a key element. The interesting thing is there aren't a lot of studies that indicate, specifically empirical data that says, if you have a positive attitude, you'll certainly survive. And we don't ever want to say it's sort of a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of equation, but we do know that the more positive your attitude, the better off you're going to be. And that's not necessarily true with all cancer survivors. It's pretty much true with all of us.
Yeah.
The more positive we can be, it just, the biorhythms in our body indicate that we're just going to be better off that day if we can conquer that mountain at the beginning of our day.
And positive thinking is one thing, but it's also stress.
Right.
Stress is a killer.
Right. Well, and that's another way that through the body part of the experiences that we have, whether it's our weekly yoga class or our total training or meditation, Tai Chi, we offer all these different things. And it just is a way to move that body or move that stress out of your body to a point where you're going to just be a more healthy person in the end.
What about the nutrition element? There are some people that believe that it's all important. There are some people that are cynics, kind of like me. I look at, okay, you want to eat right, you want to stay healthy, obviously, but does nutrition actually play a role in slowing, halting, or preventing cancer?
Yeah, Dr. Deming speaks often about about a third of all cancers are preventable. And obviously, if people would stop smoking, that would be the biggest one. But also just the way we eat and the things we eat, it was recommended, for example, I heard somebody speak the other day that said, we should all eat the things that if we put them out on the counter for 2 days, they'd be rotten. I mean, that should be our first focus. I met yesterday with the director of the Iowa Healthy Estate Initiative, and they have what I think is a pretty simple axiom, and it's 5, 2, 1, 0. 5 fruits and vegetables a day, 2 hours or less of screen time, an hour of activity, and 0 sugary drinks. Now, mostly that's targeted at children, but boy, when I sat and looked at that, I thought, Well, it doesn't tell us not to eat pizza or not to drink a glass of wine or whatever, but it gives us a goal to shoot at that, gosh, if we could do that, all of us would be healthier.
Right. But it's no substitute for other forms of treatment. It's a piece in the puzzle.
Right.
You
exactly.
hear about these Hollywood celebrities and stuff. Okay, the guy sat around and ate carrot sticks till he died.
Right.
I mean, it's not a cure in and of itself.
No, I had somebody when I was first diagnosed, she sent me an article that a spoonful of asparagus juice would cure my cancer. And I thought, well,
Cure, yeah.
I think I'll go with the customary treatment instead,
Yeah.
But it is, and we talked a little bit about this with the Healthiest State folks yesterday. All these things that, eggs are bad for you. And then a month later, it'll be like, no, one egg is actually good for you. And or a glass of wine,
wine, coffee. They talk about, is it good or is it bad?
Coffee is really good for you.
Yeah.
Well, then you say, no, it has so many, So anyway, I think, one of the things that one of the presidents that I worked with at Simpson College for years always said, all things in moderation, including moderation. And I think that's a good thing for all of us to think about.
Well, the other thing about your organization is this isn't just for the people that have been strict. Caregivers are part of this also.
Absolutely. A very key element of our success as far as participation in mostly the trips and the different activities, the seminars and the spin class and those kinds of things. It's almost 50-50 as far as cancer survivors and caregivers. So I'm just overwhelmed at the number of caregivers that we have and their dedication to our organization.
Yeah. And it isn't just for the physically fit. I mean, you talk about, climbing the Himalayas and spin classes and maybe even yoga, some of those things. What about, cancer affects a lot of people that are older, that are not in very good shape.
Right.
What do you have for them?
We have all kinds of things. There's a walking class. We have a bicycle club that meets every Wednesday or every Tuesday throughout the summer. This is a perfect illustration to me. We were on the High Trestle Trail one Sunday, which was a special bike ride, and we had one of the assistant coaches from the Iowa Wild was there, and he was an amazing athlete. And we also had a woman who was in her mid-70s who had never ridden that far, but she was eager to do it with the umbrella and the safety net of Above and Beyond Cancer. So Brad Anderson, the director at the time, he and I rode with this woman to help her finish, and I looked down on my speedometer, and we were going about 8 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Now, if you know anything about biking, 8 miles an hour, you can hardly be upright. By golly, she finished, and she was so proud of herself. And, of course, when we got to the destination, here's the guy that finished a half hour ago or so because he was such a good biker and great athlete. So it was just that camaraderie that we all had experienced that touched by cancer.
Which, again, is a positive thing.
Absolutely,
you don't want to just getting away from the isolation. That's the other part of it. Again, when you're older, sometimes people don't get out. They don't get around other people. They don't get that, I would describe it as juice from other people.
Right.
You need to be around other people for the camaraderie element of it. One
of the things that people ask me often is, do you have group therapy sessions, or do you... And the answer to that is no, we really don't. But in our activities, it's amazing the friendships that are born. We just had we have a partnership with the Drake Community Press, where in about a year we'll have finished a coffee table book about the history of our organization and how it's touched people's lives. One of the components of that was an art as therapy course, where 12 cancer survivors worked with an art instructor, and none of them had any art background. And some of them were better and some of them weren't as good. But the value of it was the interconnection that these 12 people had. And I read through the evaluations, and it's just striking how committed these people are to each other. And they're going on with their lives together as almost a support group within the confines of what they were already supposed to be doing, which was to learn a little bit about art.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about you. Dr. Deming, the creator, the person responsible for starting all of this. You're a survivor.
Right.
You're not quite as old as me, maybe, but, in your lifetime, this cancer, now, am I right? They're making a lot of progress with the childhood cancers.
Right.
Is that because of the research and because they're solving things, or just because kids are stronger. They're more likely to survive regardless.
Yeah, there's a lot of, one of the things that we know in our field is research dollars are really obviously very important. And childhood cancer gets a great deal of attention, as it should. I mean, it's just nothing is more heartbreaking than when you see a child who is going through cancer treatment. At the other end of the spectrum is the least funded research is lung cancer, because most of the national legislators believe, sort of through intuition.
It's your fault. You smoked.
Yeah, you're the one who did it to yourself. The reality is there's a large measure of people who get lung cancer who absolutely never smoked.
Right. There's small cell and large cell. What is that?
Yeah, it's a very complicated and so we are always advocating for more dollars, but they're very hard to come by, as you might imagine. And the American Cancer Society and the ACS Cancer Action Network, they do a great deal of lobbying, and very successfully, both on a state level but also on a national level, to get those research dollars.
So, I'm just a guy out moving around, and I'm at that age where I'm talking to people that have a tendency to be touched by cancer a little bit more because they're older. Pancreatic cancer, as an example, why is it so deadly?
Mostly because it's undetectable. So you have to sort of trip over it on a annual physical or something in that line, because there aren't any symptoms. For example, when I was diagnosed with Nonhodgkins lymphoma, all my middle was compacted because my lymph nodes had gotten so large. And I couldn't even bend over to get the dog's leash to help him get out. And I felt sick. And so when I got that diagnosis, I actually said, "Oh, good." And the nurse said, "Good." And I said, "Well, I'm just glad to know what's wrong with me."
Right.
And that there's a plan to treat it, but most people, and pancreatic cancer would probably lead this list, they don't feel bad. There's nothing that they physically feel. They go to the doctor and their levels are off, or their blood test indicates that something's wrong, and then they discover that they have pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, so the value of the regular checkup to catch it, because it just depends on where it's found. I mean,
absolutely, yeah. Between there's lots of things that just a regular checkup will find, and certainly breast cancer and exams are the key to that, and regular mammograms, and that whole kind of vision of preventive health is really key to cancer survivors.
I love talking to you, somebody that knows what they're talking about. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds too much on the science side of it, but the guy at the end of the bar, he'll tell you chemotherapy. Now, back in the day, he used to say it's a race. It's either going to kill you or the cancer is going to kill you, and if you take it, you may wish that one of them killed you.
Yeah, sometimes.
There's been some improvement in chemotherapies, though, right? The chemicals themselves, yeah.
Well, and as I said, there's so many variables that they've been able to sort of lighten the blow, if you will, and to do things like they used to just sort of concentrate that chemotherapy. Now it's sort of spread out, and often there would be times where I would go 3 days of chemo, and then I would be off for 2 weeks while my body healed. And, the sinister humor, we always used to say, "Well, I'm feeling better. It must be time for more chemo."
Yeah.
The whistling through the cemetery concept.
Yeah.
But that is true. They've figured out that instead of just, compounding the illness by continuing to hammer away, let's hammer away for a few days, let the person or patient grow stronger, and then try it, and then do it again as it progresses.
Well, let's take your particular form of cancer, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Again, I think of hockey. Mario Lemieux had that, and he was able to overcome it. Yeah, and he's a big supporter. He contributes a lot of money. But say somebody gets that diagnosis, they come to your organization. Kind of walk us through what happens. What's likely to happen with somebody that comes to you?
Yeah, mostly the people, they sort of find us, and then they have their interest at heart. In other words, maybe they would like to, get back in shape after they've had their chemo process. Maybe they just want to be part of our book club, or they want to take a nutrition class at the Kitchen Collage in the East Village. Teresa Adams-Tomka has been a great supporter of ours and lets us do our classes there. So it depends on where their interest is. and we cater directly to those people's interests because we have such a broad spectrum of activities and adventures.
You know how I am. I can, God, knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen to me. But I just want to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to somebody that knows, what they're talking about.
Right.
You can meet with your physician, and they're very good, and they answer all your questions. But when that meeting is over with, it's over with.
Right.
I need somebody else.
Right. Yeah.
So
well, and that's the value of having our organization be populated by both cancer survivors and by caregivers. One funny comment that I heard from one of our board members at a meeting was, when his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, the doctor said, and if you need a sedative at this time, I'd be glad to provide that. And he said, he threw his hand up and he said, well, if she doesn't, I need it,
Yeah.
because there's so much of a value and a challenge for both people or several people involved in this cancer journey. And that's really who we serve, is everybody involved in the whole process.
We're getting close to what normally is our time limit for the podcast. We run about 25 minutes. I wanted to ask you about this angle because the subtitle for the show is News, Blues, and Interviews. We have a lot of politics on here. Would I be wrong to surmise that because of the federal budget and the deficit and cutbacks and the desire to reduce taxes and all those types of things that some of the emphasis, some of the spotlight is being taken off of cancer research and the funding for that? Or is that true or not true?
It's been pretty consistent over the years, and it is not a Republican or Democratic issue. Everybody, we talked earlier about, everybody's been touched by cancer, and so the research dollars aren't diminished. They may sort of stay stagnant over time, which obviously economically tells you that they're declining. But we could always use more research dollars, and those are always very hard to find, as you said, with people being cognizant of the budgets and different things than that.
So what gets you excited right now?
Trying to, what we talk in our organization, what we're trying to do is continue to scale up our operation. We're a pretty well-kept secret, and we'd like to be less.
We'll help with that.
Yeah.
We'll get the word out. Yeah.
We'd like to be less of a secret with people. So, and just to always discover new people that can be involved in our organization. And one of the things that we've tried to do, for example, instead of an international trip that takes 2 or 3 weeks and thousands of dollars, we're going in August to the YMCA of the Rockies out in Estes Park. And it's a 1 week of vacation that you need and $1,500. So we'll do 4 different day hikes that will be challenging, but we'll also have a medical mission where we visit people and patients in the cancer wards in Denver or Colorado Springs. So it provides people an opportunity that they don't have to take 2 weeks off of work. They can take 1 week and $1,500 and ride the bus out to Colorado with us, and our hope is that we'll have about 40 or 45 people that will join us this summer.
Right. And some of it, obviously, the local classes and all that has to be local. But you guys, it doesn't have to be local. I mean, people can contact you from all over the world, really, right?
Right. Yes, and they do. I send out an email over the weekend, for example, to get people to help volunteer at Market to Market this weekend, because we're the charity of choice and we provide 28 volunteers for them, and they pay us per hour per volunteer. So it's a great thing for us. And I received a couple emails back. One was from a woman who said, I'm in South Africa, so I'm not able to help. But please don't drop me from your list.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
So, we've been discovered, particularly from our international travels, that we have connections all over the world.
Yeah, this stuff's great. I got a listener on the podcast from Malta.
Yeah.
I thought I had to get out a map, and I wondered, isn't that around the Mediterranean? Where is that?
Yeah.
Where is Malta? I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about world geography with this job so far, too, for sure.
Well, tell us here now, before we close out, tell us who you would like to contact you, and then tell us how they can do that.
Yeah, we're pretty easy to find on the web. It's probably the best place to find out as much as you can about us. It's just Above and Beyond Cancer, all squished together, .org. And then all of our contact information is on there as far as how people can reach us if they have any further questions.
And it's across the spectrum. It's if you don't have cancer and you want to prevent it, there's something for you there.
Absolutely.
If you've got a diagnosis, just diagnosed, you're there for them also. Post-diagnosis, And then, of course, the caregivers,
Right.
also a big part of this as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We Dr. Deming always defines any cancer survivor as somebody who found out this morning they have cancer, or somebody who had it 10 years ago or 20 years ago or longer ago than that.
So that's great. Well, that's a great podcast. This is what it's all about. I tell people, like, so much of the world, so much of the public discourse is so trivial and banal, let's say. I love that word, banal. Always try to. It sounds like banana, but it's not banal. It's just some of the stuff that's going out and that's in the ecosphere, so to speak, and politics gets there too. I mean, my God, enough is enough. But this kind of stuff deserves to be put out there, and I'm happy to be able to do it. Our guest today, Christopher Goodale, with Above and Beyond Cancer in historic Valley Junction, but reaching out around the world and helping people with that cancer diagnosis and the people that take care of them. And for today, that's going to do it. So that's going to wrap it up. And thanks again for listening to another podcast by George.